Good morning and welcome to the Committee of the Whole for Thursday, January 12th, 2023. It's 9:32 and I'd like to call this meeting to order and acknowledge that the Sunshine Coast Regional District is located on the territories of the Sechelt and Squamish Nations. We have an agenda in front of us today. Directors, are there any changes to make to this agenda? If not, I will look for a motion to adopt as presented. Moved? Seconded? All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much. Can I have a motion to receive all reports? And it's just reports today. Moved, seconded, all those in favor? Excellent. Thank you very much. That's carried. First up is the Sunshine Coast Farmers Institute delegation regarding Stage 4 water conservation regulation exemptions. So I assume that's who we've got in the room here today. So come on up to the microphone and yeah.
We have a presentation on the PowerPoint. Is it possible to put it through something? But also, we have a paper version because we know that may not be.
We're going to take a 5-minute recess because they've got a presentation that they want to put up on PowerPoint and we have to get that set up. So just bear with us for a few minutes here. All right, and welcome back. Now that we've got the presentation sorted out, we will turn it over to the Farmers Institute. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you for having us here today. My name is Julie Carrillo. I'm with Heart and Soul Farm, and this is Mel Sylvestre from Grounded Acres. We thought we'd start off today, excuse me, Sherry, next slide, please. With Common Ground we also acknowledge with respect the unceded and traditional territories of the Squamish and Shishal nations where we live, work, and collaborate. I think we all agree here that everyone must eat and that local food security matters. It says so right in the SCRD agricultural plan that set goals to identify opportunities for us to strengthen farming on the coast, to increase the amount and access to locally grown food, to build community resilience, and to develop clear policies that serve to protect, preserve, and promote agriculture. And so I think we all definitely agree that local food security matters. It improves the freshness, the quality, the health of our food supply. It builds community resilience. It creates local employment. It energizes the coastal communities, and it protects the coastal environment. In 2022, local food farmers like ourselves were cut off from the SCRD water for almost 3 months, from September 14th to December 13th. And what that meant to us as farmers was reduced late season plantings. We can harvest right through the entire fall and weren't able to plant because we had to preserve the plants we already had in the ground. The crops we had in the ground were dying. It prevented us from planting cover crops, which would protect our topsoil and prevent erosion and loss of nutrients. And it also created an unrealistic increase in farm labor to bring in other sources of water. Farms are already running quite lean in terms of profit margin, and we spent hours daily to go and fetch water from other areas in order to keep our crops alive, the little bit that we had. So the impact was a reduced amount of local food in our supply chain, catastrophic impacts on our farm cost and income, and environmental impacts resulting from the lack of cover crops. Mel's been farming for over 20 years. She brings incredible skill to the trade. She's got 3 employees on her farm. Socrates and I, we've been doing this for 3 years. We're brand new at this. So we don't bring the same level of skill that they do. What we know a lot about at this point is that it takes a lot of skin in the game to do this. Most of you run businesses as well. And so you know what it means to put in all your capital investments at the onset of your business. And every year as we're running our business, most of our spend, all the consumables, employee salaries occur before we've even made our first sale. And so it's a risky business to get into as it is. And we do it, as we've demonstrated in the earlier slides, because we all agree that it's important, that our community needs it, that local food security is a priority. But without water, we can't grow food for our community. And this is where we're coming to you for help.
And just to add to, before we go any further, is that acknowledging that a lot of the business currently, we're not homesteaders. We actually run business. Me and my partner live from what we're doing. We have employees that comes for the summer, like just saying we're going to 4 employees, and we know many other farm on the coast are in the same situation. So it is not just a hobby here. It is actually a business and a viable business if we get given the chance to run it as a viable business. And the second thing we should state before going any further is a lot of us are not on wells, despite the fact that it's widely spread that like most farmers are on wells. I think a lot of homesteads are on wells. A lot of the production farm that I know personally are not on wells, and the cost of establishing a well at this point is a capital expense that most of our business cannot take at this point in our growth.
Yeah, I definitely know we can't. And so we respectfully request permanent exemption for commercial food farmers from stage 4 water restrictions. Water restrictions based on indoor versus outdoor water use is simply unfair to farmers. We're required to grow our food outdoors. Restrictions are not in the best interest of our community's needs, nor in the interest of our food security or our ecosystem's long-term health. Additionally, we're hoping that you'll consider a review of water rates as they pertain to commercial farms. We're proposing a 50% reduction on commercial water rates and an increased threshold for flat commercial water rates.
And there are many examples from other districts to be based on in terms of agricultural water rate, and we invite the SCRD to look into those other models in that case.
We're requesting these exemptions and the reductions because we believe that food is an essential human need, and as such, local food production needs to be protected. Farm water use is part of the hydrologic cycle, and it recharges the aquifer. Soil-based farming improves our ecosystem and reverses climate change. Quite frankly, local farmers are already at a breaking point. And if we're going to make farming attractive in our community and bring in additional local producers, we need to be helping. And our commercial farmers need equitable access to our water infrastructure. We believe that together we can do this. The changes we're proposing are aligned with the SCRD's Ag Plan and the We Envision Plan, both of which refer to the need to support a local, viable, and resilient food system. During global food shortages, we need local farms now more than ever. And our proposal will have minimal impact on the water supply and a significant impact on the region's struggling farms. Please help us to protect the sector that feeds us. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much for the presentation. Directors, do you have any questions for our delegation today? Director Bax?
I was wondering if you have any information on your water usage, either broken down. I know that probably certain months need more water than others. Do you have information on your average or monthly usage?
Yeah, I would have to go top of my head here, so I'll average the number because, but I am tracking actually pretty diligently. Of course, it's based on the amount of acres a farm will have, so depending on the amount of acre and then the type of crops also that is grown. If you grow squash versus if you grow salad mix, you're looking at like a 10 times more per acres. So with all that considering, and let's say, assuming that most people do kind of a mixed vegetable crop, in our case, their highest usage is at starting in around mid-June and goes until September. And it will average between starting around, I would say, 300 to 400 cubic meters a month to about, I believe it's 700 at the peak.
Is that based on an acre? Or
it is based on a full acre. In our case, we were about 1.1 acres last year in production. We're
Okay.
doubling this year. But
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Gabias?
Oh, yeah, I remember how to use the microphone. Thank you so much for coming to us today. Very informative. I'm wondering, you talked about other places that have different models. Do you know, top of your head, a few that we could look into?
Comox Valley, I believe, is one. The Cowichan, is that, if I'm right, the Cowichan, and I believe it's hard because I know some of the region have a NAG supply system. Like they literally have pipes that are not treated water that goes in. We know it's never going to be the case on the coast. But I think the region like Comox Valley and Cowichan don't have that kind of infrastructure, so they put in place a rate to meet and support farmers. I don't have the details of it, but I'm fairly sure that this is what I can remember from the top of my head, 2 of the examples we had looked into. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Director McMahon?
Thank you. And yes, and we do need to look at the water rates for food growing. I mean, we know that. Do you remember off the top of your head how many commercial farms we're talking about. There's not that many on the Sunshine Coast.
So yeah, it's how we define commercial, right? And I know the SCD is working on redefining commercial. As I understand, you're going with a definition of like farm status, and we know that farm status does not necessarily mean commercial when you're talking about like making a living out of your farm. So from making a living, I think we are in a zone of like 5 to 10 farms. Yeah. Some farms keep to themselves a little bit more, so they're not as active and part of the group, so it's a bit harder to know, but we know we have a minimum of 5 and it could be up to 10. They're actually making a living and employing people. And are looking, and in those, a lot of cases, and the One Source Society actually just did a report on that and invite you to look into it. In a lot of cases, most of the farms that are not very big right now all stated that they wanted to become bigger. And they need support to do this. They need support to employ people and big, and they have sometimes the land base to do so, but they just don't have the capacity. And are scared of moving forward, not knowing if they would have the amenity to do it also.
Director Stanford.
It's been a long time. Is there a rough estimate of how much local food farms produce on the Sunshine Coast?
I would invite you to come and see our Instagram. My partner is the social media geek, and she put together an amazing summary of what we've grown this year in poundage. And unfortunately, I'm the one that do the finance in our farm, so I only remember finance all, but we've grown for over $100,000 worth of food just in 2022, to give an approximate. To me, poundage and the amount of food is kind of a city one. If I was a lettuce farmer, my poundage would be very low compared if I was a squash farmer. So sometimes revenue is a better indicator of how we're running and how successful our business is.
And that's for the one business or for the
that,
business?
just our business.
Great.
Yeah, so we're estimating, like if we were looking at like 5 to 10 commercial farm, we're estimating we could look into $500,000 to $1 million worth of produce being produced on the farm. If we were able to do our job the right way.
Thank you.
Not
Director
able
Lee.
to, but-
Thank you, Chair. My question is theoretical, probably, because if we do give exemptions and we put them on paper, they become forever, of course. Well, pretty much. So my question is, would you see some limit on the amount? Because if you look at the bigger picture of the world, and take California, the farmers are actually the major users of the water. So right now, I fully understand we're struggling to get past the hobby farm. And yeah, it's something that we definitely should consider. But when you draft something like this, it's for the long term. Is there some qualifications you would see put on the amount of water we would be asked to provide for this purpose?
I believe that one thing that's a bit limiting factor on the coast is the size of land. California has hundreds and thousands of acres in flat, perfect, fertile land. I've looked for 5 years to relocate on the coast because we couldn't even find 2 acres of cultivable land. So I think that limitation in land space and land base is actually the limit you're gonna need for water. I don't think any farm would ever be capable to go an unreasonable amount of use of water, except if you go hydroponic, which is not what we're talking about here. And the other thing I want to state in terms of like, if there's a fear towards that, is that we now found out this year there's a stage 5. And I would be more than happy if farmers were put in a stage 5. I think we understood that at that point we were in a time crisis and we all wanted to like join the battle in saving. And even when we entered stage 4, everybody that I knew as farmers, we all cut down for sure. Even in that 2 wheat exemption, we had to, because our plants cannot adjust overnight to be water, no water. So we all started decreasing. So I think we want to, like, we're players here in the game of like, we all are in
Part
this
of this
together.
community, yep.
So I believe that our demand for this stage 4 exemption is also acknowledging that like we know there's another stage after, and we're more than happy than jumping on board at that point, which limit it. And also a little bit from the frustration of knowing that non-essential businesses were put in stage 5, and we believe essential as we grow in food, and we are before brewers and cideries and bottling water. And that was a little bit of a painful reality to learn that.
Thank you for that. Director McMahon, I see your hand up again, but just before I go to you, I'm just gonna check because we've got Director Henderson and Director Paul joining us electronically today. So I just wanted to check and see if either of them have questions for our, oh, and Director White, my apologies. I just want to see if any of the three of them have any questions for our delegation here before I come back to the room. Director Henderson?
Thanks, thanks, Director. Oops. I guess I just commend you for coming and being with us. I think exemptions are great, but as you'll hear more about what we really need is to get a lot of supply so we don't have to spend time on these things. So I think I just leave it there. Supply is the key. Thank you.
Thank you. Director McMahon?
Thank you. And yeah, by the way, that was a great PowerPoint. The question I'm going to ask, I probably already know the answer, but it's timing. When do you need to know about water supply in order to make plans for the upcoming growing season?
Today would be great.
Yesterday. To be honest, we're all in this currently. My seed order is my seed scheme in even. So I'm in it. I'm going to make it happen. The difference is going to be if I can make it another year or not after this. If I go in deficit this year, that's it. So I think we need to know, we need to know before the next exemption come in for sure. It will save me a lot of sleepless night too, to know that I can get into this without being cut off. Or currently watching my topsoil eroding because I could not establish a cover crop, and that is thousands of dollars of nutrient and fertility that I put in the last 2 years on my land. So sooner the better is the answer.
Thank you. I know that we've got a review of our water restrictions that happens annually. We haven't done that work yet. I don't know if CAO McKinley or it's just a quick question. I don't know if we know when that review is scheduled for at this point.
I don't know. I don't know if Mia Edbrook might be able to answer that.
Thanks for the question. So historically, we have looked at our water conservation regulations annually. To be honest with you, I think it's quite confusing to the community to change our regulations every year. So that's not the approach we want to take moving forward. We are doing a full review of bylaw 422. So that's our water rates and regulation bylaw. And then after that, we really want to keep our water conservation regulations as is. Things that we will be taking and incorporating will be learnings from our emergency operations center and calling a state of local emergency and seeing what could we put in our bylaws where we wouldn't have to call a state of local emergency, so that we would have want to be able to explore any powers that we could put into our bylaws so that we wouldn't have to make those one-off or bring in that level of authority, like to be able to have them in our existing bylaws. And I'll just remind you what we used under our state of local authority this year, or sorry, state of local emergency. The authority we sought was to temporarily stop certain business activities, and that's what was presented during the presentation, was activities that are run indoors where they continue to use water, but I'll remind you that those are all commercial businesses that do pay a volumetric rate.
Okay, thank you. Director Bax?
I wanted to get a copy of the PowerPoint presentation.
Sure, no problem.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Director Bax. Took the words out of my mouth. I just hadn't gotten there yet. Director McMahon?
Yeah, that was, me too. The situation we're in, I hate to use the word unprecedented, but it really truly is. I think all of us had expected that we would have the Church Road well online this fall. And then, of course, that fell off the plate, and by then it was kind of too late. Also, the degree of the drought, the degree of the impact on the soil conditions around here, and it's not just this year, I think it's the cumulative impact of all the droughts we've had, It's extremely concerning. And so, yeah, we really need to support the farmers, and we all need to be collecting data on this too, because the hydrology of the region is changing, and we don't know what we're facing going forward. So we have to do our best to understand the new reality, whatever that is. So thank you very much for coming.
Thank you. Director Paul.
Thanks. Well, thank you, Chair. It's kind of a question suggestion. Are the farmers open to maybe the SCRD or BC government helping secure long-term loans for wells? Because to me, I think it's probably only been 50 to 100 years that we assume that we should use treated drinking water to water farms, where in the past it's always been creeks, rivers, or wells that supply that. So I'm just wondering, of like the conservation standpoint, part of the presentation said that there was that part of the hydrology is that it returns water to the aquifer. So by definition, taking out aquifer water and going back down becomes a cycle. And then top up where you need from the treated drinking water. I'm just wondering if that's a way, if that's a better solution financially and stuff like that, if it could be very low interest terms and possibly include grants to do wells and stuff to supply this. It seems like it's a more environmentally friendly way and will get you isolated from most of the drought stuff and then just top up when needed, kind of thing. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, we on our land we looked into, and to be honest, I would way rather watering my crops with well and non-treated water. Treated water has even things that are not good for the cropping. That's our land. We are new to our land. We've been there for 2 years. The previous owner had drilled a well and hit a cave. And had to flip the cost of the drilling and everything. And they drilled in 2 different places that they never located water. It's a 5-acre parcel of land. We are not 100% sure. So the cost, even the first cost for us to even have the drill happen is scary because we may end up with 0 at the end. That's one aspect of it. And I have looked, and I agree with you. I think provincial government should flip part of those bills and support agriculture. And maybe there's possibility to push in this direction. What I know as a farmer, I am at the mercy of every season, and I know this is not going to happen for this coming season. If it's even next season or the season after, if there's anything of any support, I'm more than happy to keep pushing that direction. I would be a happy farmer on the well, for sure, way happier, and I would be happy to leave the treated water for drinking and animals. But yeah, that's kind of what we're in here today. But I do acknowledge you're right. Like wells would be a way better solution for us. But as it is right now, the capital expense of it, just a no-go.
We're talking about $80,000
Yeah.
to get a well onto our property.
Including a pump and everything, yeah.
So to recover that kind of expense at the profit margins we make would take an extremely long amount of time.
Thank you for that. Directors, I don't see any other hands up. It is not our practice to make motions on delegations, just gives us time to think about it and consider next steps. So thank you for your presentation today. I think we all look forward to receiving a copy of it so that we've got it.
Perhaps we can let us know who it should go to. Got it.
I'm happy to also send all the data from the water usage for a farm along with the presentation. I think could be helpful. I just was mentioning numbers off the top of my head, but there's a lot of numbers in my head, and I'm a sleepless also parent, so don't trust me 100% on those numbers. I will send those.
We certainly appreciate the opportunity to have come in today, and if there are any follow-up questions, we're available as well.
Thank you. Director McMahon, I see your hand up. Is that for it's for staff, so, okay, thank you.
Thank you very much for having us.
Did you want to go ahead and ask your question of staff?
Sure, I just wanted to drill into timing a little bit more on this. If we were to make a decision, I remember last year we extended for 2 weeks the stage 4 exemption to commercial farms. When is bylaw 422 coming forward? And what opportunities are there to revisit the commercial farm situation for this coming summer?
Through the chair, and thank you for the question. We are currently, through the 2022 budget proposals, we were asked to explore our water rate structure. So we have begun initiating a water rate structure review, which we started in December. So when we're looking at overall rates, if we make reductions in rates in one area, we still have to meet cost recovery. So that's something to think about, right? And I think the additional context is not all farms are on a volumetric rate. They actually have the choice. They have the choice to be on a residential rate, even though, as they discussed, these are businesses. But some farms are on a flat rate and some are on a volumetric rate. So I think there's our desire, and the conversations and engagement that we did in the spring was really about bringing forward consistency amongst, and that's something that we're certainly looking for amongst this entire rate structure review, is like, how do we make sure that there's fairness and consistency amongst all water users, knowing that water is quite, we're constrained, and we don't have sufficient water supply to meet everyone's water needs. So in terms of, we don't have anything scheduled to bring forward this spring. In terms of bylaw 422, we certainly can bring something forward. At this point, when we hear a request for reductions in rates, which we heard during the engagement last spring, to me, I think we need to complete the water rate structure study so that we have a full picture of all water users and not a specific segment. So we'll be completing that work this spring. The contract is estimated to be completed by the end of May.
Yeah, follow up. So the water rates review is really important and it can't be rushed. I totally get that. I'm just wondering what steps we could take to provide some certainty to farmers going into this growing season. If there are any temporary measures that we could take prior to the entire bylaw review. Do staff have any ideas?
Not to put you on the spot here, but
Thank you for the question. We can bring a staff report forward with options. Again, I think it's important to consider the length of time that we were in stage 4 and how quickly stage 5, I'm going to put that in quotes, was mentioned. So what do you define as stage 5? What do you define as a farm? There are a lot of questions there. We put forward a proposal because it's really difficult for us to assess who's a farm and who's a farm business and what is the correct crop that we should be providing exemptions to. It's easiest for us, it was referred to in the presentation, to refer to land classification. But if we need to dig further into invoices and doing an application process, maybe that's something that staff need to consider so we can bring forward those options.
I think that is far too in-depth for a conversation right now. But something for directors to consider. Director Bax.
Yeah, I'd like to reiterate what Director McMahon was saying in the fact that I think it's very important that we do get a chance to review the how the restrictions are handed out, which parts of the users get restrictions at which time before we get into the summer months. The rate usage, I understand that there's a lot of work that's going in, and we may be delayed on rewriting it until Seashelt has completed their meter installation, at which point we'll need to have a new 422 in place. But I think this is an urgent matter.
Thank you. Director McMahon?
Yeah, there are two separate issues here. One is the actual supply of water, and the other is the price. They're related, but they are two different things, and the pricing is more complicated, I think, in some ways. But the assurance that there will be water is kind of required before you can plant your crops. And of course, we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what the weather's going to be like. We hope that Church Road is going to be online very, very soon, but we don't know that, and I'm no longer willing to go out on a limb because we've missed so many deadlines in the past. So I would like to move that staff bring a report to a future committee meeting on what the options are to provide some security to commercial food growers for the 2023 growing season.
I'll second that.
And that's been seconded by Director Bax. Thank you. Directors, any comments or questions or discussion? Director Lee?
Thank you, Chair. Before I vote, I would like to hear from staff, like how onerous did we just ask for? Are we talking months of work or weeks of work, and I'm talking manpower wise?
Through the chair, I think it might be helpful to bring some data forward to you. So you were talking about one farm, and I think maybe a broader picture of what the potential impacts would be might be helpful. And I think, again, important to remember where we were in stage 4. Stage 4 is an emergency, right? So stage 4 is about providing water for health and safety, about ensuring that we have sufficient water for fire protection, especially when, as you recall, we didn't have water for basically July onwards. We had very few rain events between July and December this year. So that's certainly a priority, ensuring enough water for the hospital. So we consider stage 4 an emergency. So perhaps some additional context will be helpful in that report.
I hate to do this kind of thing on the fly, of course, but I think that's what we got here. At some point, we initialize our EOC, and then we leave the decision on who gets water up to them. And we, in fact, at that point, can stop indoor growers as well as outdoor growers because it becomes an emergency and they make decisions. Do I have that right?
Through the chair, that was through the state of local emergency. That provided additional powers that aren't in our existing bylaws.
Not the EOC specifically, but the actual state of local emergency.
Oh, yes, the provincial state of a local emergency, yes. So that's when we started really getting serious about what I would call stage 5 as opposed to stage 4. Yeah, that's my rule of thumb thinking on it, just so. Anyways, that's something to consider now, and I guess we would be getting that on the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Director McMahon?
Yes, I appreciate that it is an emergency. I also appreciate that we ducked a bullet because we didn't have any major fires. If we had had a fire on the scale of the marine fire in Gibson's a number of years ago, we would have been in a world of trouble with our water supply. However, having said that, I'm also really concerned about the state of our soil locally. My garden is like I have never seen it before. I have a bed where I dug up potatoes and there's not a single weed growing in it. That is not normal. So I think we also have to consider the state of our soil as another local emergency. And I realize this is a juggling act and it's complicated and it's difficult, but any helpful guidance that staff can provide would be very much appreciated. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any other hands up and I don't see anybody online waving at me. I will call the question on this. All those in favor? Any opposed? Director Henderson, I'm sorry, was that opposition?
No, I'm supportive. Let's get it done fast, please.
Okay, thank you. That is carried. Okay. I think we have run that well dry, so to speak. So we will move on to Annex A in our agenda. Infrastructure Planning Grant, grant application for Square Bay Wastewater Collection System Upgrade Planning Study. And turn this over to Manager Waukee.
Thank you, Chair. As noted in the Square Bay Wastewater 2023 User Fee Report presented at the December 9th, 2022 Special Committee of the Whole, the Square Bay collection system is in poor condition. A budget proposal will be presented in round 1 next week to bring forward a deferred project that was deferred a couple of years ago for planning for system upgrades in the Square Bay collection system, partially funded by grant funding. There's currently an opportunity to apply for an infrastructure planning grant that would fund up to $10,000 of the $15,000 project that's proposed. The deadline to apply for this grant is January the 18th, next week. And to be successful, the board must commit to funding the unfunded portion of the costs associated to the project, which could be up to $5,000. Staff recommend committing up to $5,000 from operating reserves and applying for the grant to assist the service area accomplish its goal of asset replacement and upgrades. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Always a good opportunity when we can apply for a grant. Director Bax.
I'd like to move that we accept this proposal as stated on the agenda.
The recommendations.
On page
1 of the agenda. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
And I did see a seconder for that, so thank you very much. Any discussion, questions, comments? Director Lee.
Yes, my one question is that I noticed this thing was commissioned in 2019 and we're spending this kind of money on it. Is there any other unpleasant surprises expected? Because it looks like a bad design to me.
Thank you, Chair. What we're talking about is the collection system. This grant is to review the collection system for the wastewater service area. What was built in 2019 is the actual treatment plant itself. So there's a 4-year-old treatment plant being fed sewage and infiltration and everything else from a 45-year-old collection system that needs lots of work. And one more follow-up is that, as I've stated in the past, to be successful for a grant, you need a feasibility study. And this is a feasibility study.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't see any other hands up, so I will call the question. This is voting all directors because it's a single participant service. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. Moving on to Annex B in our agenda, the BC Marine Trails Network Association request for letter of support. Turn this over to GM Gagnon. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair. I don't have an introduction. I think the report is fairly self-explanatory, but I am available for questions if necessary. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I look to directors. Questions, comments, motions? Director Stamford.
I would like to move the recommendation on page 4.
Thank you. And I've got seconders for that. I don't see any other hands up, so I will call the question. This is voting all directors. All those in favor? Thank you, that's carried. Moving on to Annex C. That is Community Emergency Preparedness Fund, approval of extreme heat risk mapping, assessment and planning grant. And turn it over to Manager Trite.
Thank you, Chair. So we're asking for the board to accept the grant proposal. We applied for a grant last summer for $120,000 for planning for extreme heat events. We were successful in that grant application. And so we're asking that the board accept the grant of $120,000 to be used for the extreme heat risk mapping, assessment, and planning.
Thank you for that. Director McMahon.
Yes, I was looking on the UBCM website at this, and it says that the risk assessments identify the social, economic, and environmental impacts of extreme heat events. So are we partnering with Vancouver Coastal Health and the Community Services Society and other organizations that have the kind of social data that we lack?
Thank you for the question. To be honest, this is the first time they've ever done these sort of grants, and these sort of plans. I would expect that that would be the route that we would go. It's a regional grant, so we have all the 3 jurisdictions as part of it. And certainly we'll be speaking with these other organizations, or at least the contractor will, with regards to making sure that mostly the extreme heat events tend to impact the vulnerable people the most. And so as the plan is put together, certainly that will be the focus.
Great, thank you. Director Bax?
Give me a moment here. Go on. There we go. I'd like to.
Turn your microphone on.
I'd like to move that we accept the motion as the recommendations as put forward on page 7.
Thank you, and I've got seconders for that as well. Director Lee, I saw your hand up, but I came down when you made the motion, so I assume that you were just going to make the motion?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you, Director Lee. I don't see any other hands up, so I will call the question. And this is voting all directors. All those in favor? Oh, my apologies. Director White? You're so little on my screen. I'm so sorry. Go ahead. But you are muted, so I can't hear you.
I was not trying to stop you from calling the vote. I was just trying to vote.
Oh, okay, okay.
I thought you were ready, but then you said a couple other things.
All right, let's try this again.
Sorry.
All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. So next up, we have Annex D, TELUS Next Gen 911 Service Agreement, and this is Manager Trite again.
Thank you, Chair. So this report is in relation to the advent of what they refer to as Next Generation 911 or Next Gen 911. It's a mandated improvement to the 911 systems, which will result in a number of improvements with regards to people being able to call 911, real-time text, to submit videos, to submit photographs, and so on, and eventually for those things to be forwarded to the responding agencies. So it's a significant improvement over the current 911 system. It's going to take time to implement, and obviously there's going to be costs associated with that. So moving forward, the report asks that points out there's going to be a $10,000 per year for 5 years cost as our portion of funding this improvement in the 911 system.
Okay, thank you. Director McMahon, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I have a question about timing. I'm going to recommend to the new directors that you go back and watch the presentation we got on Next Generation 911 on March the 17th, 2022. I was a little boggled by some of the implications to us in terms of costs being downloaded from the implementation of this new system, which we don't have any choice about. But because TELUS is requesting signed agreements by December 31st, so I'm just wondering about the timing. Is there a reason that we're doing it now? I know that UBCM is advocating with the province and the federal government for more support for local governments to cover the costs of this new system. So just wondering whether we should defer or whether there is some advantage in going ahead and getting this done now.
Thank you for that. Manager Trite.
Yeah, so I mean, the report today is focused on conformance with the federal requirements. And so UBCM's advocacy relates to provincial leadership and support within those guidelines. the actual implementation wouldn't be till April 2024. So at this point, there's no, I guess, financial commitment. But it's moving forward. We're gonna, one way or another, we will have to embrace or accept the NG911 system, because that's going to be the only system that's existing.
Thank you. Directors, any other questions, comments, recommendations? Director Bax?
Yeah, I'd like to move that we table this recommendation to a future date.
Do you have a specific date in mind, or
No, I don't have a specific date in mind.
I'm going to look over at my corporate officer.
What does she say?
So legislatively, I can give you advice, but I think that
Turn your
we
microphone
might
on.
want to check in with the manager to understand the implication of delaying this decision.
Okay, thank you. Manager Trite, is this something that we require a decision on today, or can we table this until a coming meeting? And is there a date that we should be bringing this back before? I mean, obviously December 31st is on here, but we don't want to leave it to the last minute.
No, I would, thank you, Chair. I mean, decision does not have to be made today. If the board wanted to push it back for a month or, or something and do some more research and put some more thought into it, I don't see a problem with that.
Thank you. GM Hall, I see your hand up.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of timing, staff's comment would be that there are financial implications expected in the 2024 fiscal year. So bringing this, tabling this until the 2024 budget process starts in fall 2023. As the manager said, I don't think that would have an operational impact. So that would, I believe that would be September or October, not remembering the budget timetable for 2024 at this specific moment. Thanks.
Thank you. I guess before I continue down my speakers list, I question what we would expect to change between now and this coming back. At the end of the day, it's, do we move forward with 911 services or not? My speakers list disappeared. Director McMahon.
I think honestly, this is more of a gesture of protest than a substantive motion, because yes, of course, we are going to be part of 911. We have no choice about it. That's, but we can go down complaining.
Thank you, Director McMahon. Director Lee.
Always happy to go down complaining, but my question is if we delay this or not, are we influencing anybody? I don't see where we would be influencing anybody. I don't see where we would be helping UBCM with their advocacy. I don't know, even as a symbolic gesture, if it has any symbolism whatsoever. So I'm not big on visiting the inevitable again and again.
Director Bax.
So my motion to table wasn't strictly a symbolic act. I wanted to give the provincial government time to rethink their position about funding this essential operation, and seeing the timeline in the proposal, I see that we do have time to allow the wheels to turn a little bit, and hopefully we won't have to pay. Eventually, if the provincial government balks at this essential service for our community, then of course we're going to pay for it. But I just thought it would be in our best interest not to accept the inevitable just yet, to give the government, the provincial government, a chance to step in and do what we all think that they should do.
Director McMahon?
Yes, I assume at some point in the next year or so, we'll be receiving a staff report on the implications to the regional district in terms of expenses and equipment and so forth for the new service, especially for the fire departments. Is that the case?
Good question. Who would like to? So you're looking to see if there is a report coming with the operational implications for the regional district. I don't know if Manager Trite has an answer to that.
Thank you, Chair. So the initial steps are going to be, the change in the system is going to be focused on the caller, the technology of the caller contacting the dispatcher, so that they'd be providing information to the dispatcher. Somewhere down the road, it's anticipated that information will also be able to be shared with the responding agencies. So initially, I don't see any additional investments in our hardware, either for communication or for the fire departments being required.
Okay. Follow up?
It's been a little while since that last meeting, but I remember there being some serious implications in terms of IT, in terms of data collection, security, storage, deletion, etc.
I would have to go back and revisit that. My recollection was that was going to be on the e-com end rather than on the dispatch side.
Okay. Director White.
Still on the move. Here, Director.
Sorry, Director White, you're cutting out really badly.
Okay.
Try that again, but turn your video off first. Sometimes that helps.
Oh, it's the wrong place.
Oh, there we go. You sound
Is that better?
Yeah, go ahead and try again.
Now?
Yep.
Okay. So I'm just uncertain where we are right now. Director Bax made a motion. Maybe it wasn't seconded. I think we were trying to clarify if it was in order.
You're right. I have not asked for a seconder yet, and we've started to go sideways. So
We were trying to clarify if it was in order, and now we're talking about a whole bunch of other stuff.
yeah,
I'm wondering if the motion's in order.
thank
I'll
you.
second it. I think his rationale makes sense. It does sound like there's still some advocacy going on, and we have some time.
Okay, thank you. So I've got a motion to table on the floor. I believe we are allowed to debate this. Yes.
Yes, that's
Thank
correct.
you. Okay. Director Lee.
I'm wondering about the logic in bringing this request forward this early then, based on what I just heard. I was wondering if I could get clarity on it. Is it something we are going to tax this year is why we're doing it? Do we need the money in the bank? Do we need certainty to have staff work on it? Those are the questions I would like to know.
Okay. I believe that this is probably just to get it off of staff's plate as quickly as possible, but I see GM Hall has appeared, so perhaps he wants to tackle that question.
Thank you, Chair. No strategy associated with timing, just staff are working down the list of requirements and had a small window to prepare this. Thanks.
Thank you. Director McMahon.
And I appreciate staff being proactive. I would support Director Bach's motion if we set a timeline, like September, for bringing it back. I don't like sending it into limbo without a return date. Thank you.
Is that an amendment you'd like to make, Director McMahon?
Sure, I would propose an amendment that it would be tabled until September.
I'll second.
Thank you, Director White. Director Stamford?
On the
Yes,
amendment?
Yep, do we, okay.
Go ahead, Director Stamford.
Thank you. I would like to know, what are we going to do as board members while we're waiting until September? Is there an opportunity for us, when we meet our MLAs, when we speak to the province, to bring this up as an advocacy aspect, that's what we're trying to do here, right? Do we need a specific motion to do that, or are we just gonna add it to our table of subjects to speak to the province about?
We don't need a specific motion for us to take on an advocacy effort. We can just add it to our list of things we complained to them about already. Director Bax.
I would like to amend my motion to.
Sorry, we already have an amendment on the floor.
Oh, which is what?
September.
Oh, okay, yeah, I'd like to put a date on that, September 14th.
No.
No?
Sorry. We have an amendment on the floor
All right.
for September that needs to be decided on before we can even consider any other amendments.
Okay. Okay, and then after that's amended, then we can decide on the
I
exact
question
date?
why September 14th specifically.
Because it's the first committee of the whole of September.
I would discourage us from boxing in staff that tightly. I would encourage us to leave it open so that they can decide what meeting it comes to.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Director White, I see your hand up still. We're good?
Am I good here? Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Sorry, I'm coming from a phone. I'll try to change that if we have a recess. But now I heard, so UBCM is advocating for this. A motion has already been passed at UBCM, correct? So we don't need to worry about UBCM dates for this year. I mean, they don't need further direction. I did second this, but then I thought, oh, maybe we should wait until October and wait until, is it possible we should wait until at least just after UBCM?
I guess the problem with that is that even if it comes up as a resolution at UBCM, the province doesn't usually respond until February or March the following year.
I know, yeah.
So actually, we should be expecting the UBCM response from the province in the next month or two from last UBCM.
Right. Sounds good, yeah, and it's all like, if it does seem like it's being revisited next fall, we could always kick it ahead too. It's no big deal. So I support this amendment.
Thank you. Director Paul.
Hi, just looking for clarification. This is approval for a payment that doesn't come till 2024, correct? So even if UBCM changes it, then this would just be returned to our normal general account anyways. Like, this is a future payment, so delaying a decision on this does not make sense because it's still not a payment till next year. So I'm just make sure everybody that's clear on that, if that's the case.
That is the case from everything that presents itself in the report, that this would be a new expense starting in 2024. Corporate Officer, I see your hand up.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just requesting some clarity on the motion, whether it's to postpone or to actually refer the report to a future committee.
Your motion was to postpone this.
Postpone the decision.
Until September.
Yes.
Well, excuse me.
Table. It's a table. To table the motion.
You're right. Director Bax said table.
I would suggest that clearer wording might be that we either refer or that we postpone it to a certain time, or if you postpone it indefinitely, it won't come back at all. Just for clarity, for staff purposes, that would be, we wouldn't use the word table to action it.
Apparently you're reading the wrong book, yeah. So a friendly text change to postpone.
Would you like me to
Just
take another step?
We do have an amendment on the floor,
Postpone.
but the intent was postpone.
Correct.
To postpone the decision is my understanding.
Correct.
Then. Thank you.
And we're dealing with the amendment to September at this time. Director White, I see your hand up. Is that still, or, okay. I'm gonna call the question on the amendment of September. All those in favor? Any opposed? Director Lee, would you like that recorded?
Yes?
Okay, and Director Paul, I saw you in opposition as well. Did you want that recorded? Yes, please. So Director Lee and Paul opposed. That amendment is carried. So now we're looking at postponing this until September. So I'm just going to call the question. All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4. All those opposed? 1, 2, 3. That is carried. Director Lee, you were opposed. Did you want that recorded?
Yes, please.
Thank you. I would like my opposition recorded. And I'm sorry I missed the third person. I think it was Director Paul. Director Paul, did you want that recorded as well? Okay, thank you. So I guess we'll see this in September. Okay, moving on to Annex E in our agenda package, Islands Cleanup Services Contract Extension. I'm not sure who, oh, my apologies. Turn this over to our Solid Waste Programs Coordinator.
Thank you, Chair. The SCRD has a contract with Mercury Transport to provide barge work and container and hauling services for the annual Islands Cleanup Program. The current contract expires on March 15th, 2023, and can be extended for up to one additional 2-year period. Staff are satisfied with the Islands Cleanup work done to date by Mercury Transport. Mercury Transport is interested in extending their contract. The costs for 2023 are estimated at $161,480, and for 2024, $167,939. Staff are looking for direction from the board in regards to extending the contract for an additional 2-year period. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Directors, questions, comments, motions? This is voting all directors, but I'll look to my Islands folks first. Director Stanford.
Thank you, Chair. It's more just a comment. As being a participant within this program, I just want to emphasize how well used and important this program is to all islanders. It did take a couple of years for Mercury to get up to speed on the familiarity of how the islands operate, how best where to put everything. But now that's quite a smooth operation. I don't have any concerns with extension of this particular group moving forward.
I don't see any other hands up. Would you like to make some recommendations for me?
I can make a recommendation. I recommend that we move forward with the recommendations on page 12.
Thank you very much. And I see seconders for that. Look for any other questions, comments, discussion on the motion.
I just have one.
Go ahead, Director Bax.
I have one question. So I'm all in favor of this contract extension, at which point it goes back to tender in 2 years? Okay, I just wanted to know that.
Yeah, okay. Don't see any other hands up, so I will call the question. All those in favor? Thank you, that's carried. All right, next up, was there anything from the POMO minutes that needed to be discussed? I don't believe so, unless there's anything directors specifically want to flag. And if not, all right, we have no communications, we have no new business. We do, however, have an in-camera session. So I would look for a motion that the public be excluded from attendance at the meeting in accordance with section 90, subsection 1E and I of the community charter, please. Moved, seconded, all those in favor? That's carried, thank you very much. I would ask for questions from our audience, but we don't really have an audience today, so we will just take a couple minutes here to go in camera. And welcome back to the Committee of the Whole for January 12th, 2023. Having concluded our in-camera portion, I look for a motion to adjourn the meeting, please. Moved, seconded, all those in favor? Thank you very much. We'll see you at the next one.